It happened on an ordinary evening, the kind where you expect nothing more than a quiet dinner at home. She set down her glass of wine, looked me dead in the eye, and without a tremor in her voice said, "I never loved you. I only loved your money." In that moment, I felt the floor give way beneath me. For years, I had believed I was building a marriage based on partnership and affection, only to discover I was nothing more than a paycheck in her life. I didn't even respond right away. My throat closed up, my hands trembled, and my mind raced through every memory of our life together, suddenly tainted. My name is Michael, and I am 38 years old. I thought I had chosen a woman to share my life with, someone who would stand by me when the world turned cold. Instead, I was living beside a stranger who had just admitted she never cared about me, only the comfort that my money provided. I remember staring at the ring on her finger, the one I bought with so much excitement nearly 10 years ago, wondering if it had ever meant anything to her. Was every "I love you" rehearsed? Was every kiss a lie? I wanted to scream, to demand answers, but all I could do was sit there, paralyzed, as if my entire life had been a cruel joke. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay awake replaying her words, tried to convince myself I had misheard, but her coldness was undeniable. I felt betrayed, humiliated, and, more than anything, determined. If she had used me for my money, then I would make sure she never touched another cent of it once we divorced. And so, that was the night everything began, the unraveling of a marriage I thought was real, and the start of a battle I never imagined I'd have to fight. For years, I convinced myself I had the kind of marriage most men envied. We lived in a spacious house with polished floors and a neatly kept garden, always ready for weekend barbecues and family gatherings. To the outside world, Emily and I were the image of stability. She dressed elegantly, smiled at the right moments, and played the role of a devoted wife so well that even my closest friends told me I was lucky. But the truth was different. Behind closed doors, there were cracks, subtle at first, but they grew wider with time. Emily had a taste for luxury, always insisting on designer clothes, extravagant vacations, and the most expensive restaurants. At first, I didn't question it. I was proud to provide, proud that my business was strong enough to give us comfort. I told myself I was just being a good husband, that spoiling her was proof of my love. Looking back, I can see the warning signs. There were nights when I would say, "I love you, Emily," and she would just nod or smile faintly, her eyes already on her phone. Once, during an anniversary dinner, I caught her staring blankly at me while I reminisced about our early days together. There was no warmth in her gaze, no spark. I buried that unease deep inside, convincing myself that maybe I was overthinking, that people show love in different ways. The facade began to crumble when I noticed her withdrawals from her joint account. Thousands of dollars vanished every month, and when I asked, she dismissed it with vague excuses about household expenses. Yet, nothing in the house had changed. No renovations, no new appliances, just the same four walls and her growing collection of jewelry and handbags I never once saw her wear. The moment that broke me was at a family gathering when my sister pulled me aside and whispered, "Michael, she barely talks about you. It's always about money, trips, or things she wants to buy." I brushed it off, embarrassed and defensive, but deep down, I knew my sister was right. Now, after her cruel confession, all those pieces fell into place. The smiles, the expensive tastes, the hollow words, it was all a performance. A performance I had funded. That night, as I stared at the empty side of our bed, I realized the perfect marriage I had built was nothing more than an illusion. And illusions don't survive when the truth comes crashing in. The morning after her confession, I sat in my office staring at the phone for nearly an hour before finally dialing the number of a divorce attorney recommended by a colleague. His name was Richard Holloway, a man in his early 40s with a reputation for being ruthless in the courtroom. When he answered, his calm and steady voice gave me just enough courage to explain what had happened. We met later that afternoon in his office, a place that smelled faintly of old books and leather. I told him everything. How my wife admitted she never loved me, how she had been draining our accounts, and how I wanted out before she could bleed me dry. Richard listened carefully, scribbling notes on a yellow legal pad, occasionally looking up at me with a sharp, calculating expression. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair, tapped his pen against the desk, and said, "Michael, you need to understand something. If we don't act smart, she could walk away with half of everything you've built. But if we move carefully, we can make sure she leaves with nothing more than what the court requires." His words hit me like a jolt of electricity. Half of everything? The thought of Emily taking the company I had spent 15 years building from the ground up made my stomach turn. I had started with a single truck and a few tools, working 16-hour days until I had a full crew and contracts worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. To imagine her walking away with half of it after admitting she never loved me, it was unbearable. Richard leaned forward, lowering his voice. "Do you have a prenuptial agreement?" I nodded, relief flooding me. "Yes. I insisted on one before we married. At the time, she wasn't happy, but she signed." That was the first time Richard actually smiled. "Good. That's our strongest weapon. But we'll need evidence. Proof of her behavior, her financial misconduct, anything that shows her intentions were never genuine. You keep quiet. Don't tip her off. Let me handle the rest." As I left his office, I felt a strange mix of fear and determination. For the first time since Emily's confession, I wasn't just a victim of her betrayal. I was preparing to fight back. And Richard made one thing very clear. This was going to be a war, and in wars, the side with the sharpest strategy usually wins. Richard's advice echoed in my head for days. We need proof. So I began digging. At first, I wasn't sure where to start. But late one night, while Emily slept in the other room, I logged into our joint bank account. My hands were shaking as I scrolled through the statements, line after line of transactions. That's when I saw it. Regular withdrawals of $5,000, sometimes even $10,000, all marked vaguely as household expenses. I knew that couldn't be true. We weren't renovating, we hadn't bought new furniture, and nothing in our lifestyle explained such large sums disappearing. My stomach churned as I clicked deeper. The trail led me to a separate account in her name. It was cleverly hidden, almost like she never expected me to find it. Tens of thousands of dollars had been funneled there over the last 2 years. Jewelry stores, high-end boutiques, even wire transfers I couldn't trace immediately. I felt sick. It wasn't just that she didn't love me. She had been actively bleeding me dry while pretending everything was fine that I confronted her the next morning, holding the printed statements in my hand. "Emily, what the hell is this? Where's all this money going?" She didn't flinch. She crossed her arms and smirked, as if I had just asked the most naive question in the world. "What's yours is mine, Michael. Or have you forgotten your wedding vows?" Her arrogance lit a fire in me. This wasn't the face of a woman who felt guilty. This was the face of someone who thought she had already won that I called Richard immediately after the argument. His response was calm, but firm. "Good. That's exactly what we needed. Keep collecting everything. Every receipt, every withdrawal, every smug comment she makes. It will all help us." That night, as Emily scrolled through her phone on the couch, acting as if nothing had happened, I realized the war had truly begun. And for the first time in our marriage, I wasn't going to play the role of the accommodating husband. I was going to fight, and I was going to win. After discovering the secret account, I couldn't shake the thought that there had to be more. Money alone didn't explain her coldness, her constant distance, or the way she brushed me off when I tried to connect with her. So one evening, while she was showering, I picked up her phone. I knew it was a line I had never wanted to cross, but something told me the truth was hiding there that it didn't take long to find it. A string of messages with a contact saved under the name Vanessa. Work. Only it wasn't Vanessa. The language, the tone, the late-night timestamps. This was a man. His name was Chris. My blood ran cold as I scrolled. One message made my hands shake so violently, I nearly dropped the phone. "Don't worry, babe. Once the divorce is done, you'll be set for life. He'll never see it coming." Another, "He's clueless. I'll drain him for every penny, and then we'll finally get what we deserve." I felt the air leave my lungs. Not only had Emily never loved me, not only had she been funneling money out of our marriage, she was plotting with another man, someone she had been seeing behind my back. The betrayal was so complete, so absolute, that for a moment I just stood there frozen, the phone glowing in my hand. When she stepped out of the shower and saw me holding it, her face twisted. "What the hell are you doing with my phone?" I didn't yell. I didn't throw the device. I simply handed it back to her and said, "You just made a very big mistake." Her eyes flickered with something, fear, maybe, but then she recovered quickly, smirking the way she always did. "You think anyone will believe you? You think a judge will care? Everything we have is half mine, Michael. Half." But I knew something she didn't. With Richard's help, those messages would become the nail in her coffin. Evidence not just of greed, but of deception, infidelity, and premeditated financial manipulation. That night, as she slept peacefully beside me, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling. For the first time in weeks, I wasn't afraid. I had proof, I had a plan, and soon she would realize that the man she underestimated was far more dangerous than she thought. The next morning, I met Richard in his office again. I slid the phone across his desk, already unlocked, the messages still open. He scrolled slowly, his lips curling into a rare smile. "This," he said, tapping the screen, "is gold." He explained that not only did the messages prove infidelity, but they also showed intent, clear evidence that Emily had entered the marriage with financial gain in mind. Courts didn't look kindly on manipulation like that, especially when it was documented in writing. Richard leaned back in his chair and steepled his fingers. "Michael, listen to me carefully. We're not just going to protect your assets. We're going to make sure she leaves this marriage with nothing. No company shares, no alimony, not even the luxury to call herself a victim." Those words fueled me like fire. For weeks, I had been drowning in betrayal, but now I felt the sharp edge of purpose. I wasn't helpless anymore. I had a weapon, and his name was Richard, that we spent hours preparing. Richard advised me to gather every financial record, every bank statement, every email that hinted at her misuse of funds. He also insisted I stop any unnecessary communication with Emily. Let her think she's still in control. The less she knows, the better. That night at home, I acted normal. I even sat with her on the couch, pretending to watch a show while inside my chest my heart beat like a war drum. She laughed at her phone a few times, probably texting Chris, the man she thought she would build a future with using my money that I almost pitted her. Almost. Later, as I lay in bed, I thought about the man I used to be. The trusting husband who believed in love, who ignored the signs, who worked himself to the bone to give her everything. That man was gone. In his place stood someone sharper, colder, and determined to win. Emily had declared war on me the moment she confessed she never loved me. But now I was finally ready for battle. And this time, I wasn't planning to lose. The day of the first hearing arrived faster than I expected. I walked into the courthouse with Richard at my side, wearing a suit that suddenly felt heavier than armor. Across the room, Emily sat with her lawyer, her hair perfectly styled, her lips painted in the same shade of red she used to wear on our anniversaries. She gave me a cold, confident smile, as if she still believed the world belonged to her. Her attorney opened with a speech that almost made me laugh, painting Emily as a devoted wife who had sacrificed her career to support me, and now deserved her fair share. I watched Emily nod along, crocodile tears forming at the corners of her eyes. It was a performance, polished and practiced, but Richard was ready. When it was our turn, he calmly handed over a thick binder to the judge. "Your Honor," he began, "this case is not about fairness. It is about fraud, manipulation, and calculated deception. And we have the evidence to prove it." He presented the bank records first, dozens of unexplained withdrawals, and a secret account in Emily's name. I glanced at her then, and for the first time, her confident smile wavered. Her lawyer shifted uncomfortably, already sensing the ground slipping beneath them. Then Richard played the trump card. Printed screenshots of the messages between Emily and Chris. The courtroom went silent as the judge read through the lines. "Don't worry, babe. Once the divorce is done, you'll be set for life." Emily's face turned pale. She tried to speak, but the judge raised a hand to silence her. My heart pounded in my chest, a mix of rage and vindication. Every sleepless night, every doubt, every humiliation, it was all being laid bare under the cold fluorescent lights of the courtroom. When the session ended, Emily wouldn't look at me. She gathered her things quickly, her lawyer whispering frantically in her ear. For the first time, I saw something in her eyes I had never seen before. Feared as I walked out of the courthouse into the crisp afternoon air, Richard placed a hand on my shoulder and said, "This is only the beginning. But today we turn the tide." And I knew he was right. The war wasn't over, but the battlefield had shifted. For once, I wasn't the man being used. I was the man fighting back. The days following the hearing were some of the most tense of my life. Emily's confidence had been cracked in that courtroom, but she wasn't ready to surrender. If anything, she came home angrier, colder, and more vicious than ever. One night, she stormed into my office at home, slamming the door behind her. "Do you really think you're going to win, Michael?" she spat, her voice dripping with venom. "You think a judge will strip me of everything after 10 years of marriage? You're pathetic if you believe that." I kept my eyes on the papers in front of me, refusing to give her the satisfaction of a reaction. But she wasn't done. She walked closer, lowering her voice. "Chris and I have plans. And once this is over, you'll be nothing but a bitter old man with money nobody wants." Her words cut deep, but instead of breaking me, they hardened me further. I looked up, met her eyes, and said calmly, "You've already lost, Emily. You just don't see it yet." For the first time, she flinched. She quickly masked it with a sneer, but I saw the crack point 2 days later. Richard called me with news. "She's trying to file for temporary spousal support," he explained. "A desperate move. But with the evidence we have, it won't stick. In fact, it will only make her look weaker." Sure enough, at the next hearing, her request was denied. The judge cited the financial records, the secret account, and the incriminating messages as proof that Emily had no grounds to demand support. The look on her face when the ruling was read was something I'll never forget. Rage mixed with disbelief, as though the world had finally stopped bending to her will. That evening, she packed a bag and left the house without a word. For a moment, I stood at the window watching her car disappear down the street, a strange mix of relief and sadness in my chest. The breaking point had come and gone. Emily was no longer my wife in spirit, only on paper. But soon, even that paper bond would be torn apart. And I promised myself, as I closed the curtains and sat in the silence of my home, that when the final judgment came, she would walk away with nothing but the consequences of her own greed. The final hearing felt like walking into the end of a long, brutal war. Months of preparation, sleepless nights, and bitter confrontations had led to this single day. I sat beside Richard at the polished wooden table, my hands clasped so tightly my knuckles turned white. Across the aisle, Emily sat rigid, her lawyer whispering furiously in her ear. She didn't look at me once. The judge entered, the room quieted, and the decision was read. Every word felt like a hammer striking the coffin of our broken marriage. The prenuptial agreement was upheld in full. The hidden account and her documented infidelity stripped her of any claim to my business or assets. Her request for spousal support was denied outright. When the judge said the words, "Mrs. Carter will leave this marriage with no financial compensation beyond what is legally minimal," I felt something heavy lift from my chest. It wasn't joy, not exactly, but a grim, steady vindication. I hadn't just survived. I had protected everything I had built with my own 2 hands. That Emily's face turned pale, her lips trembling. She tried to stand, but her knees buckled slightly, and for the first time in years, she looked powerless. She muttered something to her lawyer, but it didn't matter. The decision was final as the gavel struck, signaling the end. I stood and gathered my papers. Richard leaned in and said quietly, "Congratulations. You won." Walking out of that courtroom, the sunlight felt different on my skin, cleaner, sharper, like the air after a storm finally clears. Emily trailed behind, her heels clicking against the marble floor, but I didn't turn around. I didn't need to. She had taken enough from me already. Outside, reporters lingered for another case, their voices buzzing in the background, but I barely heard them. I took a deep breath, and for the first time in months, I felt free. Not because I had beaten her, but because I had reclaimed myself. The final blow had been struck. Emily's game was over, and I was the one still standing. After the dust settled, the house felt different, quieter. At first, the silence was suffocating, like walking into an empty hall that used to be full of music. But with time, I realized that silence wasn't emptiness. It was peace. Emily was gone. No more arguments, no more hidden withdrawals, no more lies whispered behind my back. She had walked out of my life with nothing but her bitterness. While I still had the one thing she could never touch, my self-respect, the months that followed weren't easy. I had to rebuild routines, learn to cook for one, and face the loneliness that came in waves. But I also rediscovered parts of myself I had buried for years. I spent weekends with my brother, reconnected with old friends I had neglected, and even picked up my guitar again, something Emily had once called a waste of time. One evening, sitting on the porch with a cup of coffee, I realized something important. Money can buy comfort, but it cannot buy loyalty, honesty, or love. If someone values you only for what's in your bank account, you're not in a relationship. You're in a transaction that, so here I am, telling you my story. My name is Michael. I am 38 years old, and I survived a marriage built on lies. If there's one thing I want you to take away, it's this. Protect what you've built, trust your instincts, and never let someone convince you that your worth is measured only by the money you provide. And if you've stayed with me until the end, thank you. Your time means more to me than any dollar ever could. If this story resonated with you, don't forget to subscribe and leave a like. It helps more than you know. Until next time, take care of yourselves and never settle for less than real love.